Hello, human beings, PowerGamer here. My box was recently infested with termites, so I'm just trying to make sure I got the last of them. Let's check under here. Aha! Wait a minute. Oh, that's not a termite. That's a copy of Sonic Advance 2. One life gives you lemons.
Sonic Advance 2, the portable speedster returns. The second Sonic game released for the Game Boy Advance, which isn't too surprising given the first game's success. While it didn't dominate the sales charts, it was a critical and commercial hit, and introduced a lot of Nintendo players to the Sonic franchise for the very first time, so it only made sense to do a follow-up while also holding people over until the next console release. Much like the first game, it was developed by Dips, with some assistance from Sonic Team, although Sony and Bandai were nowhere to be found at this time. According to Yuji Naka, the developers began outlining this game as soon as they finished the first Sonic Advance, so they were wasting no time trying to get this thing out there, with full development officially starting in February 2002 and lasting around 8 months, which is crazy impressive. They used an updated version of the original game's engine and decided they wanted to greatly increase the game's speed compared to the first one, which also resulted in the levels being approximately 8 times larger than the ones in the first Sonic Advance. They also refined some of the game's graphics and sound, with the music being composed by Yutaka Minobi, Tasuyuki Maeda, and Teruhiko Nakagawa. Plus, as I said in my Sonic Heroes review, this game marked the debut of the character Cream, who was originally designed for Sonic Heroes, but this game ended up releasing first. Sega first announced the game on July 1st, 2002, and showed it off at the Tokyo Game Show in September of that year. Sonic Advance 2 was released in Japan on December 19th, 2002, only a year after the first one, though it wouldn't come to North America until March 10th, 2003, and Europe on March 21st. Much like the first game, it sold pretty well, not as well as the first game, but it still managed to sell over 1 million copies, which was not half bad for the time. Reception was once again positive, though not quite as high as some of the earlier Sonic games, and much like the first Advance, no one really talks about it anymore aside from people who grew up with it. So while it does have a small following, it's nothing compared to most of the console releases.
It was pretty mixed on the first Sonic Advance. Some parts were fun, but others were really frustrating. So, did Sonic Advance 2 refine what came before, try something completely different, or just totally drop the ball? Well, time to find out firsthand.
Much like the first Sonic Advance game, there's basically no plot. Eggman is causing trouble, so Sonic has to stop him, though this time there is a bit more involvement in that Eggman has actually kidnapped some of Sonic's pals and he needs to save them. That being Tails, Knuckles, and our newcomer, Cream the Rabbit, along with her chow companion, Cheese. Get it? Cream Cheese? And all that really comes from saving them is unlocking them as playable characters, with some brief motivations for why they want to help. Cream wants to save her mother, Vanilla, who has also been kidnapped by Eggman, Tails wants to help Sonic, and Knuckles wants to get back at Eggman, which is probably the most understandable motivation. The graphics for this game are almost identical to the first one, which means we have some good sprites and fun colors, but the animations have been improved, so that's nice, and the music has seen a massive upgrade. I love Sonic Advance 2 soundtrack. It is so freaking good and does an amazing job of pumping you up. I feel like we all know how 2D Sonic works by this point. Running, jumping, ring, speed, the usual stuff. Like Advance, we have 4 playable characters, though Amy has been swapped out for Cream. Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles all control exactly the same as they did in the first game, and they have all the same abilities. Sonic can use the Insta-Shield and Somersault, which I kept forgetting about. Tails can fly and uses Tail Swipe, and Knuckles can glide, climb, and punch. Plus, they can all do the Spin Dash. Also, Sonic has this Air Dash attack by double tapping the D-pad while jumping. That was in the first game, but I didn't mention it because I never knew how to actually do it. It only ever happened by accident, and usually at a bad time. He also has the bounce attack. That might have been in the first game, but I honestly don't know. But Cream is playable for the first time ever, and she is easily the best character in the game. She's not as fast as Sonic, but still faster than Tails and Knuckles. She can fly by flapping her ears, which doesn't last as long as Tails, but it's still pretty helpful, and she is by far the best attack in the form of Cheese. By pushing the B button, Cheese will automatically home in on the nearest enemy, which is pretty nice in the main game and makes the boss fights an absolute joke. Seriously, she will decimate every single one of these things with no trouble at all. It's genuinely hilarious.
Cream is an awesome addition that really helps this game stand out. In fact, this game is actually really different from the first Sonic Advance, since this is the first Sonic game where speed isn't just encouraged, it is your #1 priority.
Sonic has always had a heavy emphasis on speed, but Sonic Advance 2 goes a step further and makes that the game's most prominent mechanic. If you keep moving fast enough for an extended period of time, or hit something like a speed booster, the characters will enter this sort of dash mode. You blast off at insanely high speeds, and the better you play, the more you're able to keep it going. You could go fast in the earlier games, at least for the time period anyway, but that is nothing compared to what you can do here. There are some parts you have to slow down, but for the most part, every level is designed to be blasted through as quickly as possible, with exploration taking a bit of a backseat. There are still branching paths you can take, but it's clear this game mainly wants you to try and beat the levels at Mach 2. This is further incentivized thanks to some new additions. For starters, the capsules that contain things like shields and rings don't have to be jump on, and the same goes for the bumpers. You can get whatever's inside by just running through them, which is something I really appreciate. But more importantly, if you push the R button in the air while in boost mode or after bouncing off a spring, the characters can do these trick moves in whatever direction you're holding, allowing you to skip over obstacles or reach higher ground. And sometimes it's flat out required in order to get through parts of the level, so don't forget that you can do this or you'll seriously regret it. The sense of speed you can get in this game is like nothing the series has ever seen before in 2D or 3D, aside from maybe some of the Supersonic boss fights. It's genuinely a ton of fun seeing how fast you can go flying through these levels, though the downside is that some of the level design can feel a little basic and samey. There aren't as many level-specific hazards as there were in the previous games, which isn't a massive issue, but it can lead to the game feeling a little repetitive at times. Most of them camera stuff you see all over the place, like the classic bumpers, these handles that spin you around and you have to time properly, and way more rail grinding than in the first game, which everyone can do now, but you have to land on them in the correct spot or else you just fall right through, which can be really annoying sometimes. Speaking of which, let's actually take a look at the levels. The last game had 7 zones, but this one has 8. Leaf Forest is the government-mandated Green Hill copy, and as far as those go, it does the job fine enough. Nothing you haven't seen in any of the previous ones. Hot Crater, on the other hand, is a fire level, which makes for a pretty cool aesthetic, and my god, this music is awesome. Honestly, might be the best track in the game. Music Park is one of the more standout levels, since almost everything is made of instruments, and it actually has some pretty unique stuff. You're shot out of trumpets, bounce on music staves, and ricochet between piano keys, though these clarinets are honestly really annoying because of how slow they are. Ice Paradise is the ice level, and thankfully it isn't mostly water like the last game's ice level. In fact, this game barely has any water in it at all. I didn't think that was possible for a Sonic game, but I'm not going to complain. Yeah, the level's fine, has some slippery stuff and these gutters you can ride in. Sky Canyon is a bunch of different fans, and it's honestly kind of annoying since it's really easy to fall and full of pits. Yeah, a good rule of thumb for Sonic games that I've realized is that when you reach the sky level, things start to go downhill, as evidenced by Techno Base, which is a lab level filled with these blocks that launch you, disappearing light bridges, and so many bumpers that half the time I have no idea where I'm going. And finally, Egg Utopia, which brings back the anti-gravity garbage from some of the older titles. Why is it basically a guideline that every time you flip gravity in a Sonic game, there's gonna be an obstacle you can't avoid, and this level goes on forever, too.
Overall, I'd say the levels are passable. They can get frustrating towards the end, but for the most part, they're decent, and I would definitely say it's an improvement over the first Sonic Advance, though part of that might be because the game is a lot easier than the first Sonic Advance, which I am definitely happy with, because now I can talk about what is easily the dumbest change to this game, how getting a game over works.
You know how in Sonic 3 or the first Advance game, when you get a game over, you just restart the act you're on? Well, in Sonic Advance 2, if you get a game over, you go all the way back to the start of the zone. If you beat Act 1 and die on Act 2, you have to replay Act 1 all over again. What? Why? The other games didn't do this, so why did they suddenly change it? That is beyond stupid. I already beat the level, let me retry the one I'm actually struggling with instead of wasting my time on this garbage. And it gets even worse with the boss fights, since these are actually divided into their own sections instead of being part of Act 2. You'd think this would be because if you got a game over on the boss, you don't have to replay the whole level again, but no. In fact, if you get a game over on the boss, you have to replay both levels again. You have got to be freaking kidding me. But speaking of the boss fights, they are terrible. Yeah, this game might have the worst collection of boss fights I have ever seen in a 2D Sonic game. Because the game is all about speed, they decided to incorporate that into the boss fights too by making all of them a chase sequence where you're constantly moving forward. Problem is that makes all of them feel basically the same, and even then they're extremely annoying. All these fights boil down to are waiting for a chance to hit the boss, which feels luck-based half of the time, going for it, and either hitting them or taking damage. So these things go on forever. Now there are some neat elements like how the music changes when the boss is at half health, and you are given extra rings to keep your health up, which is nice, but that doesn't change the fact that these things are extremely frustrating and monotonous. Well, unless you have Cream, since like I said, she just snaps the game like a twig. The only thing that sets some of them apart is that when you play the game first as Sonic, 3 of them have you save your friends, which unlocks them as playable characters. First Cream in Leaf Forest, then Tails in Music Park, and then Knuckles in Sky Canyon. The only thing that really changes between fights is what weapon Eggman has. As for the more specifics, Leaf Forest, he just has a giant hammer. Hot Crater, he has a cannon that shoots rocks, and when it's destroyed, you have to hit him again while he fires more rocks, which serves no purpose besides giving him more health. Music Park, he sends these spiked platforms at you and you have to jump on them while avoiding energy shots. Ice Paradise, he drops missiles that cause rocks to fall, which you have to jump over and then wait for this platform to shift so you can bounce off of it to hit him. Sky Canyon, he's on a wheel with a laser gun that shoots you and a giant hand that spins around. You want to destroy the laser first and be careful with the hand because depending on how it hits you, it can kill you instantly and I have no idea what determines that. Techno Base, he spins these 4 platforms around him that you have to jump on, and when these lights turn red, the gray ones will spin around causing you to fall and the yellow ones will pop out spikes. But the real kicker is that he shoots energy at you, which almost always happens at the worst possible times. And Egg Utopia is in this thing with giant legs. He jumps up and down and drops bombs which make a line of fire. I had no idea what I was supposed to do here until I went online and found out that pushing up or down on the D-pad causes you to change gravity, which the game says nothing about. Once you learn that, just use the gravity to avoid the attacks and hit him at the right time. After that, you unlock the final zone, which is just called XX. The whole thing is one big boss fight divided into different phases. The first phase is just a rematch with the hammer from Leaf Forest, the second phase is a rematch with the cannon from Hot Crater, the third phase is just a rematch with the platforms from Music Park.
Do you seriously have to fight every boss all over again?
Yep, the final boss of this game is literally just reusing all of the previous bosses, but finding them all in one go. Now, to be a little bit fair, they only have half as much health this time, and there are checkpoints in between each phase. But that doesn't change the fact that this is extremely lazy, it goes on forever, the bosses weren't even fun the first time, so I don't want to do it all again, and if you get a game over, you start the whole thing over. But once you kill them all, you're done, right? Nope, because there's another phase after, which is the only non-chase fight in the game. Eggman hops in this giant robot, which shoots a laser from its eye and fires its hands out at you. All of these platforms constantly rise, and there's spikes on the ceiling, so don't get caught. Yeah, the fight gets easier when you realize the hands only go a certain distance, so you won't wait for them to shoot at you and then jump on both of them until they're destroyed. Then you want to use the platform to hit the robot in the face, but you have to be careful or you end up in the spikes. It's really easy to mess up and get stuck or laser, but depending on how the timing ends up, it can be possible to hit him as the platform is going down, not up, which is much easier. So that certainly helps, but it doesn't change the fact that this whole thing goes on for ages, and again, if you get a game over, you gotta do the whole thing over. Oh, and the cherry on top is that there's also a time limit. I genuinely spent over an hour on this entire thing with Sonic. Though thankfully Tails and Knuckles were a bit easier, and Cream, I just destroyed the entire thing in 2 minutes on my first try. I told you she was busted. Once you finally destroy this stupid thing, the place explodes and your character falls back down to Earth to celebrate with all the animals. The only one that really stands out is Cream because she saved Vanilla.
And of course, we're not done yet, because now we have to get the Chaos Emeralds, which is easily the most annoying part of the last game, and thankfully here it is nowhere near as bad. It's even f***ing worse.
I don't know what they were thinking when they came up with this, but getting the Chaos Emeralds in Sonic Advance 2 is genuinely the worst thing I have ever done in a Sonic game. As you go through the game, you'll notice these special rings scattered throughout the levels. Well, in order to reach the special stages, you have to collect all 7 of them and then beat the stage without dying, which is much easier said than f***ing done. These things are scattered all over the place, and some of them are hidden in ridiculous spots that require taking weird paths or doing perfect tricks in order to reach them. And many times you only get one shot, so if you make a single mistake, you gotta do the entire thing over again, since backtracking is usually impossible. It would be possible if I could fly or climb, but unlike the first Sonic Advance, the Chaos Emeralds are not shared in between the characters. So if you want to reach the true final boss, you have to get them all as Sonic, the least vertically viable character in the game. This is bullshit. This entire process is nothing but trial and error, tedium, and pain. Remember how I said this game was largely designed to be sped through? Well, that philosophy gets thrown right out the window when you're looking for these things, because many times you have to take the exact right path in order to reach them all. I literally had a map showing me where they were, and it was still a giant pain in the ass. It seriously took me over 40 fucking minutes to get them all in the first level. And remember, all that isn't for a Chaos Emerald, it's for an attempt at getting a Chaos Emerald. Because once you actually reach the special stages, you're just getting started. Now thankfully these aren't as bad as the ones in the last game, but they are still really annoying. They're kind of like the ones in Sonic CD, where you roam around this Mode 7 space while grabbing rings. But unlike Sonic CD, if you want to grab enough rings, you need to grab lines of them in succession to build up combos, which will make them worth more. But you only have like 2 seconds before the combo resets. The main problem with these stages is that the control is so sensitive that it is nearly impossible to actually line yourself up correctly with the rings. So most of the time, you just need to get lucky, and even that's not always enough. Plus, this giant robot follows you around that can bump into you and take some rings. He's pretty easy to avoid, but if you do get hit, you just stop dead in your tracks and can barely move. So while these special stages aren't the worst in the series, they can still be insanely frustrating, and if you don't do them properly, you gotta do the entire special ring all f***ing over again. I am not joking when I say that getting the Chaos Emeralds took just as long as beating the game with all 4 characters, if not longer. I spent hours on these stupid things. It was an absolute nightmare having to make sure I knew where each ring was and then praying to God that I could beat the special stages easily. Prayers that were only answered twice because the rest of these were awful!
Do you seriously want to know how long it took me to get the final Chaos Emerald? 3 fucking hours!
That's right, I spent well over 3 hours playing this exact same level over and over again, only to fail at the special stages again and again and again because of how heavy the turning is and how precise you have to be to grab the god rings. This is genuinely the worst thing in any Sonic game I have ever played. I'd rather refight the final boss in Secret Rings. I'd rather get the Chaos Emeralds in Sonic Heroes. I'd rather replay the entirety of Sonic 06. Yeah, that's right, I said it. Getting the Chaos Emeralds in Sonic Advance 2 is worse than anything in Sonic 06, and I don't care how many times I need to say that because this was an absolute nightmare that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemies because it brought me so much pain and agony that I never want to play this game again for the rest of my entire life! If you actually do, somehow, by some miracle, manage to get all of these pieces of You then get to redo XX, which still sucks, and then unlock True Area 53. Eggman returns and sucks up a bunch more animals, including Vanilla again, which causes Cream to break down crying. So Sonic uses the Chaos Emeralds to transform into Super Sonic, which is honestly a really cool moment. It's the pretty standard space fight where you need to avoid attacks and grab extra rings with Eggman and this giant robot that shoots energy, missiles, and a freeze laser at you. You damage him by charging the missiles and causing them to fly into his head. And after a while, instead of the freeze laser, he'll start doing the spin attack, which makes him harder to hit, but also easier to avoid. It's weird. It does the job fine enough, but it's nothing all too special, and certainly not worth going through the hassle of getting the Chaos Emeralds to unlock it. Love the music though. After it's destroyed, Sonic plummets back down to Earth with this capsule that breaks open, releasing Vanilla, and he manages to save her. Sonic celebrates with Tails and Knuckles, Cream reunites with her mother, and Sonic once again runs off to his next adventure. Doing this unlocks the Tiny Chow Garden, which is what it sounds like, and you actually can unlock Amy as a playable character, but you have to get all of the Chaos Emeralds with all 4 characters.
I'm not even gonna finish that sentence. Game conquered. Sonic Advance 2 is both better and worse than the first Sonic Advance. While it can be simple, I think the more speed-focused gameplay is really fun and helps it stand out a lot more from a lot of the other 2D Sonic games, except for the boss fights, which just suck, and getting the Chaos Emeralds, which should be considered a violation of the Geneva Convention. Playing this game was the equivalent of going to a restaurant and having a meal where the main course is really solid and the side dish is underwhelming, but then dessert comes and the whole thing is literally filled with squirrel barf. Yes, while what came before was pleasant, that doesn't change the fact that this completely ruins the experience and made me never want to play this game again. And maybe I will at some point, but that's not going to be for a very long time. So if you do decide to play this game, don't bother getting the Chaos Emeralds because it is genuinely not worth it. Your time is valuable and you shouldn't waste it on something that doesn't respect it. Like how I shouldn't have spent the last 8 months taking painting lessons where all I did was repaint the same guy's fence every weekend.